Hello everyone, this has been my second video in as many days, so I kind of back on track, I guess. I'm gonna make mention, I guess, next week I will not be posting a whole lot of videos. I will be taking some time off, I've got a couple of interviews that I've got to be conducting, so I really won't have a lot of time to be able to share my thoughts, but who knows, maybe on the backside of that I might have some more content to be able to provide to you guys. So I wanted to go over today a news article that had come out recently about 50 illegal immigrants attempting to storm the border at the Rio Grande. They also attacked border agents. And what I wanted to talk to you guys today about was, certain specifics of those, the details with what happened there. And in addition to why I am a supporter for stronger border protections. But as the article read, it happened in the middle of the night during the time that the actual border crossing was shut down. I apologize. I had something that may not have agreed with me. Anyway, but they tried storming the border during the time where the border was shut down. They ignored repeated warnings to not attempt to get across the bridge, and they forced themselves onto the bridge. They damaged some of the barriers that were put into place there, and when confronted with the actual physical border agents, they attacked those border agents utilizing fists, hitting, tried to take the protective gear. I'm fairly certain they probably tried to acquire the border patrol agents' weapons, and were finally driven off with tear gas. Now, I was born in a city near the border called Las Cruces, New Mexico. Give you an indication where that is, about 45 minutes north of El Paso, which would be another 10 minutes to Juarez, Mexico. So roughly about an hour from the border there in between El Paso and Juarez. So I've had my fair share of experience in seeing illegal immigration. You'd always hear reports coming out, especially during the 80s and early 90s when I was living there, about this person showed up dead in the desert, or they found these people, died of dehydration, disease, any of those odd things. People turn up missing at the border all the time. Kidnapping was also a big thing coming across, where the cartels would be kidnapping young girls. Human smugglers were kidnapping girls from the United States, bringing them back over to Mexico to sell them into prostitution. But I saw that a lot in my life, and it kind of influenced how I view, if these people aren't supposed to be here, why are we allowing them to stay? And I'm not as and I always get accused of being a racist or anything like that. I mean, I'm full disclosure, I'm part Hispanic. I don't like to identify with anything that isn't the word American. And people want to put Latin American, Mexican American, African American, Native American, white American, whatever. I don't see that, and I can really applaud the military mindset that helped me out with this, because initially on, when I was younger, I didn't see color. I mean, I never saw discrimination in the way that everyone was describing. Oh, well, discrimination's everywhere. I never saw that. I'd get the occasional jabs towards me being a brown kid, in a primarily white area, because after my family moved from New Mexico on up to Indiana, I didn't see hardly any other Mexican kids. I was the lone brown kid, really, in a lot of my schools, with the exception to the other brown kids being my actual immediate family members, my sisters and my brother. But to the extent where people are saying how racism is everywhere, I never experienced that. I never looked at the color of a person's skin and said, oh, immediately that's a person I don't want to associate with. But back onto the subject, why I'm a proponent for stronger border protections. Sorry, my car's hot too. I get my sweet tea. Anyway, so early on when I was seeing with the in my life where I was saying, well, these people aren't supposed to be here, why are they here? And it was more of a practical look at things. It was like I saw them as people that weren't supposed to. I saw the illegal immigrants as being people that weren't supposed to be here, and they would get arrested. And I was like, well, yeah, good. They get sent back, and I didn't understand the vast other things that came along with massive economic migration. And this is where I was talking before in one of my videos on how I don't consider these illegal immigrants as actual immigrants. They're not immigrants. They're not trying to integrate into the country. They're more economic migrants. They're trying to leave their third world poverty for a better life in America. And the United States had to build themselves up from being, not a first world nation hundreds of years ago. We were a third world backwater colony. Mexico had a lot more societal growth at that point in time than we did. They had a fairly strong military. They had a lot of backing. They were a very civilized military, while we were the backwoods Hicks. And then, like I said, with some of the other countries, they were, still backwoods back then. But, like I said, it was a couple hundred years ago. But we had to grow our economy. We had to grow our nation's power. And it's not something that happens overnight. And I think it's a real big culture shock because there is such a disparity between some of these first world nations and the third world nations. And it's no different than the gap that other nations had to deal with. I mean, the United States having to deal with other nations. We were infinitely, less civilized at early points in time than in our nation's history. Sorry, it is hot in here. Anyway, but there's a vast amount of impatience going on in a lot of these third world nations like Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama, Mexico. Mexico, I wouldn't even consider so much of a third world nation or anything like that. They are a first world. They have their problems. Crime is a big thing. Corruption is a big thing there. But they're on track, and they can potentially get rid of all of that unnecessary crime. It's just going to take a lot of power, a lot of money, and some patience. But a lot of these other nations, the people in them, they see that there's families that have multi-bedroom homes and safe communities and all this. They want that American dream. They want to reach out and grab it. Unfortunately, the American dream is not something you could just run out and take. You have to earn it. You can't steal the dream. You can't. And as many people say, this land was stolen and all this other shit. I'm not a believer of that. During those times in the formative years in the United States, there was a lot of expansion going on, and it was a different time. We were far less civilized. We were far more hyper religious in our own piousness. There was some awful things that happened, and I'd be one to say, like, you know what, that was pretty bad. The Trail of Tears, very, very bad. The Indian Wars, not so great. But, like I said, it was a different time back then. Back onto it, sorry, another rant. Where you're seeing a lot of coming coming in through those southern border areas, and it's coming from not just the Central and South American nations and Mexico. You've got economic migrants flying from Africa and the Middle East and some really destitute countries, on the other side of the Atlantic, saying, all right, well, we're going to fly to Brazil, and then we'll just take these migrant caravans, or we're going to walk from Brazil or Colombia or Central America and walk all our way up to the American border, apply for asylum, and say, hey, we were oppressed in our country. And the United States can't sustain that. So when you're looking at it, it's like, well, people do break in across the border. There are a lot of as many people want to say, it's like, well, we've got some pretty strong border protections right now. We do have some porous areas of the border, some very dangerous areas to cross through in Arizona and New Mexico. I can attest to those border crossing areas. It's at best maybe a barbed wire fence, separating Mexico and the United States. And there are some people desperate enough that they'll cross right over and walk to the desert and probably die. The survivability in the desert is not fantastic. You get lost in the desert for a day, especially like in the summertime. The temperatures in those areas, you can reach 120 degrees. And if you're not prepared for something like that, carrying gallons upon gallons of water, some high energy foodstuffs, some very comfortable clothing, and then also some protective clothing, because at the same time the desert gets cold at night, you're going to die. There are some people that do make it across, and in the past 30 years, there's been an estimated 11 to 20 million people that we know about making it across and getting into the United States that are here. And these people are undocumented, and any job that they can do, they'll do it. Sure, it does show some determination of the people there. There's quite a few jobs out there that a lot of Americans wouldn't take. But let's just say in the jobs that actually, that are actually meaning something to a lot of people now, and that would be those minimum wage jobs, your name tag wearing MIG jobs. Those jobs, they've had pretty stagnant growth as far as their wage growth goes through, and you could take a look at that through inflation. You can look at that through the value of the work. And these guys, as long as they've got a job, they don't complain. If they're having trouble paying the rent, they just bring more of their family over, work minimum wage jobs, and it supplements for the income that they lost as far as the value goes. And those and the undocumented end up having driving those wages down, because these people are always going to be they're going to be willing to work these jobs. They want something to be able to support themselves while they're here. So they'll take those minimum wage jobs. They'll take it at the lowest pay possible. They want to make themselves as lucrative to those businesses as they can. And you can't blame a business for wanting to hire some of these guys. And I know with the United States, there's actually a really severe fine system. If you were caught hiring undocumented immigrants. And I'll speak the truth on this. Currently, my home is in the Central Valley of California. It's a highly agricultural area in about 45 minutes north of Fresno. A lot of almond orchards and fields, alfalfa, and whatever else you can grow. There's a lot of it. But the farms, as much as people say, well, who's going to pick your fruit? And who's going to pick your vegetables? Who's going to work the farms? A lot of these farms out here utilize a system called the H1B Visa. The H1B Visa is where they would take citizens from Mexico. They go down there and it's like, hey, look, we're looking for X amount of workers to be able to work the fields. You'll be paid this much. You will be here in the United States from this time to this time. In which case, We'll return you back home. We'll pay for your transportation to the farms. We'll have homes where you can stay in, and then when time is up, we'll bring you back to Mexico. You get paid your fair wages, and you'll be good to go. It's a temporary work visa, and a lot of the migrants and a lot of these, and they're not so much migrants even then, they're visa holders at that point in time. They'll come up, they'll do the jobs, they'll head back down to Mexico, where the value of the American dollars, far supersedes what a lot of these workers would get in Mexico doing, similar labor. So they'll utilize that because the fine system, it is almost unfair how much. I'm sorry about the glare. I'm getting a lot of stuff from the sunset in the back. But the fines that these farms will get is pretty severe if they're caught hiring undocumented migrants. So to make the argument that people are coming, that who's going to pick your fruit, is not the case. So what would be the argument? It's like, well, they're going to take the jobs that nobody wants to do. No, they're taking the minimum wage jobs, which is what our fledgling workforce should be able to do. And we're talking like the kids that are 16 to 21, 22, somewhere trying to get wherever they need to go as far as earning money. They're finding that there's not a lot of work here on the outside, especially with some of their degree options, especially if they're going to college on these really crappy social degrees. And I actually want to talk to you guys about that, but I'll save that for another video. But it's those jobs that are making it difficult, because with how stagnant the wages have been, because of how low the migrancy has driven the demand for the workforce. You start seeing a lot. You're starting to see a lot of problems stemming up from our own population, our youth population that isn't able to provide for themselves. And then there's the argument, well, it's not like you can live off of minimum wage. No, you're not expected to be able to live off minimum wage. You're expected to be able to survive and pay for yourself. You're probably living with roommates. You're probably living at home in all probability for those kind of minimum wage jobs. It's a job that's supposed to get your foot in the workforce. I worked at Hardee's when I was 17 years old. It was a nice job to be able to get a little pocket change in before the football season would start, and I had a good time working that. When it came time to it, it was like I quit my job and got back into playing football and whatnot. But I understood that it was a job that was able to get some formative experience. On to my next work, where I was working airport security, getting paid a little bit more, and then finally into the military, where I got steady pay raises. I had to turn up the air a little bit because there's a lot of sweat going on here. Anyway, but that's where it's really affecting the workforce, is in those low wage aspects. They're keeping those low wage jobs driven down to a minimum. So there's your initial problem. It's not the character. It's maybe not the quality of certain things. I'm sure there's some excellent undocumented doctors and whatnot, but that's not the ones that we're having the issue with. It's the ones that are the low skill workers, and then they're keeping those wages driven down. You can actually track that economically, and watching how stagnant wages have been. Now everyone's trying to say, well, here's the fight for 15. We're gonna forcibly drive up wages without regard, and that's gonna be a big floppy failure. And that'll be another thing I'll get in another video about the $15 minimum wage raise. But let's talk about another thing. California is they've signed, I guess, the bills proposing free healthcare for undocumented migrants. This I absolutely fucking hate. It's a huge reason why I can't wait to get out of California. And this is how I'm going to phrase this. is how do they expect to pay for this? All right. Former Governor Brown, he started this transportation project, which would be the high-speed rail. It is grossly over budget. They've been pulling money every which way from Sunday to be able to try and pay for this. California, the only reason they are not in debt is because of the high agricultural area, the high agriculture that they have here. California is one of the largest outputters of agriculture in the United States. Actually, I think it is the largest. But how are they going to pay for this? Is it going to be through the Medi-Cal program, where we already have a lot of our welfare recipients being covered under the Medi-Cal program? How are you going to be able to afford to expand that Medi-Cal into the realms of several more millions of people just to be able to virtue signal saying how self-important you are? Like, look at us, we're so progressive. We want to give all of this to the undocumented people free. I don't have free fucking health care. My family doesn't. I have to pay through my taxes to be able to get the TRICARE. All right, I can understand. It's like, look, when they say, oh, you get free medical, free dental, and all this other stuff. Yes, I technically don't have to pay for it out of my own pocket, but I pay into the taxes to be able to do this. And given the fact that I've done 18 years of work with the military and stuff like that, I think I've earned, that aspect. It's a lot of backbreaking work and being able to help out with my family. It's a nice appeal to be able to, stay in the military. And I do pay for the dental insurance for my family. I pay for the vision insurance and whatnot for my family as well. So, but you want to go out and say, hey, let's give free health care to the undocumented. Well, what about the people that are documented that maybe aren't making such great pay? Are you going to give them free health insurance? Or what about the people that are, doing okay? Are you going to give them free health insurance? I don't know how they're going to be able to sustain the growth of millions of people, because California is a location that has a lot of the illegal migrant population here. A lot of them are here. So how are you going to be able to sustain that expansion? Are you going to tax us even more? I mean, every year they bump up the gas tax saying, oh, we need to pay a little bit more, we need to pay a bit more, we need to pay a bit more. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's going to become unsustainable. And when this finally collapses, I think people are going to realize that maybe they were going the wrong direction, making the wrong choices. There's other things that they could have been spending that money on. Let's try and get the homeless population under control here in California. There's a real threat for bubonic plague in Los Angeles. San Diego, 2 years ago in San Diego, we had to deal with hepatitis A. There was a hepatitis A outbreak that was pretty nasty. San Francisco, there are people literally walking around cleaning up human feces from the fucking streets. That is fucking gross. I had to clean up dog shit off my carpet this morning. And you're going to tell me that there are actually people getting paid to walk around San Francisco, drive around, whatever it is, and bag up human shit? Fuck that. Get the homeless population under control. I don't know what kind of programs you're going to have to instill in it. Is it going to be, large apartments or whatnot? There's a lot of things that that are going to have to be done. Much more important than trying to give health care to people who shouldn't even fucking be here. I'm sorry if I'm insensitive on this aspect, but it's one of those things that really, really irritates me. Propping up people that aren't even supposed to be here, just like they're some sort of protected class. Do you realize what people are doing? You're creating what I would actually see is a slave population in the United States. That's what it's happening. You want these low-wage, low-skill workers doing all the peon jobs that you don't want to do. That is a second-class citizen. You're trying to create a second-class person. And anybody who can't see through that, you're fucking blind. Maybe like how people are viewed in the Middle East. I'll take some experience. I'll take an example here. I went to Jebel Ali, which is United Arab Emirates, on deployment several times, and you'd find that most of the people that were doing all the really tedious work, the sweeping up the streets, the gardening, the low skill work. You're finding out that most of those people aren't even from the UAE, and it's because that work is seen as below what citizens should be doing in that nation. So you have your immigrants, the Indians, the Pakistanis, the Saudis, the Iranians that would be living there. Anybody else that from those Middle Eastern countries, the Central Asian countries, you'll see them doing that work, but not the people from the UAE. And essentially, they've created a second class citizen kind of dynamic there, and that's what's being created here. These people are always going to be under the threat of hey, if you don't do your job right or you complain about this work, you're going to be sent back. They should get rid of the incentive overall to come here under anything other than the legal stance. They should get rid of that incentive. Don't contribute to the second-class citizen dynamic there. No. So I'm against creating second-class citizens. I am against raising taxes to be able to pay for unnecessary programs that, quite frankly, don't benefit anybody that's a citizen of the United States. Although those homeless people are citizens of the United States, not the illegal migrants. Driving wages down, there's a lot of reasons why I'm against the illegal migration. That's why I'm for these stronger border protections. And the politicking that goes around it is trying to say, well, these people can't defend themselves. They shouldn't even be here in the first place. There wouldn't be any reason for us to have to defend them if they weren't even here.